Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's overview and scrutiny meeting on 17th of March 2026 at Warwick District Council. And may I wish everyone a happy St Patrick's Day, particularly for people who wish to celebrate that. Please be aware the meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel, and as part of our commitment to reducing paper, councillors and portfolio holders and officers will be using laptops and screens throughout the course of the evening. My name's Councillor Andrew Melton. I'm the chair of the committee. Alongside me I have Darren Knight, Deputy Chief Executive, and Graham Leach, our monitoring officer, standing in for Josie Wainwright this evening. We also have Rebecca Redding, Strategic Procurement and Payments Manager. Andrew Rollins will join us shortly, hopefully, Head of Finance. I think he's probably stuck in traffic. Richard Wilson, Principal Accountant. Chris Elliott, Chief Executive. Stephen Leithley, Strategic Finance Manager. And we're also joined by Councillors Davison and Chilvers as portfolio holders. So pre-scrutiny cabinet Q&As have been circulated prior to the meeting this evening. We do have a fairly packed agenda. Just a reminder on the use of mics, just please try to avoid putting anything in front of them. In your own time, Councillor Davison. I'll keep going. Right, okay, let's start this evening. Apologies and substitutes. We have Councillor Gorman substituting for Councillor Harrison. Thank you, Councillor Gorman. And we have Councillor Phillips substituting for Councillor Day. Welcome, Councillor Phillips. Thank you for stepping in. Have we got any other apologies? I think we're full house, haven't we? That's good. Do members have anything to declare on the agenda this evening? No? Right. We shall move on. And can I also ask to confirm the minutes of the meeting of 17th of February 2026. Please note there is a minor amendment that's been made to the minutes. Is that we missed Councillor Dre's attendance. So apologies, Councillor Dre. I remember you were here. So I will propose those from the chair with a slight amendment. Councillor Luckhurst seconding. All those in favour? Great. I think it's everyone good. We have proposed those and moved those. Right. Work programme. We've got a couple of things on here just to note. So at the last meeting, we'd agreed that we would add the general fund council garages to the work programme. However, Senior Business Surveying Project Manager Russell Marsden has since provided us an update that there are just 11 general fund garages and all are in good condition, let, and are in use. So I'm suggesting that probably doesn't need any more of our time. Unless anyone's got any violent objections, we shall remove that from the work. Yeah, we could do a site visit to all 11, couldn't we? Thank you for that suggestion, Councillor Luckhurst. The other piece, and sorry, I don't think it's on my agenda. So I'll come on to the agenda for this evening in a moment. One of the few items that we didn't call in, that wasn't called in, was the AI strategy. I did ask a question about it, which was about member involvement on the working group, because AI is actually it's obviously a big thing. And if we had time, it is the sort of thing that we should probably be giving some more attention to. Councillor Davidson let me know today that she is, it's intended, I understand that she's going to be on that working group. So there will be some member representation, which is good. Can I ask, would members like to add something to the work plan for maybe 6 or 12 months to ask for a review about how our progress against AI is going? Councillor Armstrong.
I'd support that, but in at least 12 months, and ideally when there were examples of it being used and having gone through the process, because I think otherwise we'd just be looking at it too early, to be honest.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Members happy with Councillor Kohler?
Thank you. And if they can come up with suggestions for how we can digest 898 pages of cabinet documents, I think that would be very welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Kohler. I shall come on to that shortly. So members are happy if we ask for an update on progress in 12 months' time, provided, of course, there are some examples to share, but which we would expect, really, I think. Councillor Phillips, sorry, I couldn't quite see you.
Yeah, a quick one. I would be very helpful if it wasn't written in IT speak, but written in English, plain English. The plain English campaign will probably have a fun day with what I've seen recently. But it is, how can we practically put it into use, I think would be what the committee should be looking at, because it is not clear at first look.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Ironically, of course, we could have probably put it into ChatGPT and asked it to create a plain English version, and it would have done it in about 60 seconds. So, okay, yeah. So are we okay with that on the programme?
Through you, Chair, as sponsor and owner of said policy, thank you for your feedback. 12 months would actually work really well, because we say we'd review the policy after 2 years as well. So it's kind of a mid-term review of it as well. So I think that's really sensible.
Great, good. We should look forward to getting that in 12 months' time. I think I need to propose those changes, don't I, to the work programme? So I'll propose those two changes. Councillor Armstrong will take you to seconding. All those in favour? Great, that's everyone. Good, okay, so we're just about to get into the substantive agenda. I'm going to pause on Councillor Kohler's points about, we've had another, so I think this evening we've actually got 8 items that have been called in, and I'm conscious we haven't actually called in the AI strategy, which is significant. We also haven't called in the second homes policy, which is a significant piece of work as well that's caused us some challenges. It was raised at the last ONS that the amount of work that we are expected to get through is actually causing challenges, and I can't be confident as chair that we are really scrutinising the work of the council effectively with the amount of things that we're being asked to look at. Would members be comfortable if I took that as a general comment to Cabinet this time? It was obviously raised at ONS last time, but it doesn't seem to have had any influence on the size of the agenda that we've had this time and the significance of the items that we've actually got to review this evening. So, Councillor Armstrong.
Just a comment on that. I mean, it is a lot, but I'd also be uncomfortable with recommending to Cabinet that they do less, which is what the practical answer to that is, because then what are they not doing that they should be doing? So I think it's a fair point, but also what's the suggested action?
Councillor Kohler.
If we wanted to halve the length of our ONS meetings, we could double the number of meetings.
Yeah, that is an option. But I think it does. My concern as chair of the committee is that we can't. The scrutiny committee is an essential part of how we make sure that we have good governance in the council. And if we're uncomfortable that we can't cope with the amount of things that are coming through, I'm nervous that we're not spotting some of the things that we need to. Councillor Kohler, do you want to come back?
Sorry, I did have I've remembered my more serious point as well, which is that I noted this time we were getting answers to our pre-scrutiny questions very late yesterday, which obviously means officers are working overtime to try and accommodate them, and we were getting more today. So basically the whole ONS process is not working.
Thank you, Councillor Kohler. I think I'd agree on that, because ultimately the reasons that we ask the questions are to help us make decisions about whether we wish to call things in or not. And if we're not getting those until after the call-in threshold has passed, or ideally we want to get them before group meetings happen on the Monday night, which is when they're scheduled, it's putting us in quite a difficult position as a committee. So So are members comfortable for me to take some of those comments to Cabinet on Thursday, Wednesday, whatever the day is? Wednesday, I think. Tomorrow, that's probably an easier thing. Right, Councillor Kohler's happy. Am I getting enough nods from others? Okay, all right, I think I've got enough nods to provide that feedback. Right, okay, so having said that, some of the items that we did call in, I will treat as soft call-ins, so we haven't asked officers to come and give a full explanation, but there will likely be comments that we wish to make to Cabinet. And one of them is a very strategic reason for that, which is one of the items that we'll cover in confidential session. So, right, item 5 on our agenda then, we have Rebecca Redding, Strategic Procurement and Payments Manager, and Andrew Rollins as Head of Finance here, and Councillor Chilvers, Portfolio Holder for Resources, to talk to us about progress on the Procurement Act 2023, 12 months on. We've obviously had a paper through. This is part of the ONS agenda for this evening. So, Rebecca, Andrew, Jonathan, who wants to give us a quick intro to the paper? Please assume that members have read the papers, and we can move from there.
Okay, so this is 12 months on from the Procurement Act 2023 coming into force on the 24th of February last year. It was the biggest change in procurement regulations in 20 years, so there is a lot of parts to consider. This report just goes through all of the actions that we set out in last year's report that went to Cabinet in February, which ones we've achieved, which ones are still in progress, and what the next steps planned out are, in summary.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. Members, questions on this paper? Councillor Kohler is going to kick us off. Thank you, Councillor Kohler.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the paper. It's a very readable paper, thank you. I got some questions. In sections 4.1, 6.1 and 6.2, you reference training. So in terms of the current contract owners, it seems that the training isn't quite being adopted or being taken up as much as you would have liked. Is the problem there that it's being seen as optional by the contract owners?
And this is something we've discussed in Procurement Champions and the SLT subgroup about how we can get that engagement, because it is mandatory training. It has always been said as such. There is another 2 mop-up sessions, one scheduled for tomorrow, one scheduled for April, to try and catch the remaining 26 contract owners, and SLT have been tasked to emphasise to those officers the importance of attending that training.
Thank you. Can you give us a sneak preview? How many of the 26 have signed up for tomorrow?
5. Including one head of service, so that's good.
That's very good. Excellent. So, yeah, I guess I'm not sure there's anything that the ONS committee per se can do to help you on this matter, but I guess unless Chair has any thoughts about how we can try and encourage contract owners to sign up to your training sessions. Well, I guess one thing we could suggest is whether we should start considering that contract owners who don't go to the training should no longer be seen as contract holders.
Is that something that's been considered?
We did discuss that at Procurement Champions, in the sense that actually how can someone that hasn't done the training that's mandatory then be involved in either managing the contract or re-procuring the contract in future. Obviously that then presents a challenge in terms of resilience from the service area, which is for the service area manager to be overseeing to make sure that there is that resilience in the service area, and ultimately those contract owners do get through the training, because their peers within the service area wouldn't be thankful for them not doing the training and passing additional work to them as well. So it is something that we are actively working on. We're conscious with the training as well that there are scenarios where people can't attend due to conflicts and timings and prioritisation and stuff. A number of sessions have been put on, so we are expecting to get through these people. But yeah, we are actively working on it.
would it be possible that an incentive could be created by saying, I mean, I guess there's two different things, aren't there? There's the management of the contract, but the re-procurement. And from my layman's point of view, the re-procurement seems the more serious, where you'd really want somebody to have gone through the training before they embark on the re-procurement process. So in that case, would it be possible or sensible to create a rule that says if a contract owner hasn't gone through it by the time a re-procurement process starts, then the re-procurement work falls to their head of service?
If that's what you're suggesting, then you can put that forward as a recommendation. It's probably not for me to do that here myself. It'd be something that I'd have to take back to speak to my peers on.
Okay, so would, so I just want to conclude on your point, Councillor Kohler, so I guess the suggestion here is we're asking for a bit of strengthening, really, aren't we, around the, not quite the sanctions, but the approach for making sure we get people through training. Councillor Chilvers.
Yeah, no, I think I would welcome Overview and Scrutiny's contribution on this. Certainly the members in the procurement champions and SLC procurement subgroup were very clear that, you know, this training is important as part of that wider upskilling and improving our contract management as an organisation. That's something that's in the corporate strategy, and it's something that we've been really clear on. And so, you know, this is, you know, we'd definitely welcome the contribution and continued oversight on this matter.
Okay. Councillor Kohler, come back to you.
Thank you. There was one other point I just wanted to raise. I noted in the appendix, when it's talking about social value, it mentions considering developing social value training in 26-27. So we're obviously not there yet, but I guess that training is going to take some time. Is a decision, has it been decided when a decision is going to be made whether you're going to be creating that additional training?
My intention is definitely to do that. However, my priority up until now has been to relook at all of the procurement training offering following on from ONS in 2023, and therefore I've started rolling out additional training. So contract management training has now gone out, which includes some terms and conditions training that was mentioned previously as being beneficial. Then the intention will be to roll out commissioning, sourcing, and yes, I would love to get to social value, although it's bearing in mind this is a bigger thing than just procurement. Social value is something procurement can deliver, but what that looks like in the round is more of a council-wide initiative. So we're just kind of a spearhead for getting that information out to suppliers.
Thank you. That sounds very interesting. If that training does go ahead, I would personally, if you were open to expanding it out to making it available to councillors, mandatory or otherwise, then that would be, well, I would welcome it personally.
Yep, more than happy for councillors to attend any of the training sessions. In fact, we did have some of the procurement champions came on the Code of Procurement Practice training session that ran last December. So,
good to hear, and thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Councillor Kohler. So I think we're sort of getting there's a clear message, I think, from the committee that actually we would welcome if you were to pursue some ways of enforcing a bit of encouragement, should we put it that way, on people to adopt the training, because I think it is obviously clearly very important to making sure we've got the right infrastructure and the right governance around things. Councillor Barton.
Yeah, it's more like on Councillor Kohler's first point about being unavailable for training. If we're not unavailable for training, we're in trouble. You firstly go back to the Yes Minister episode. Are the companies that aren't turning up for training, are they performing in every other way? Or are they failing in other ways as well?
the training isn't for the suppliers, the training's for internal officers. So, and it's run by myself and created by myself. So I try and make the running of the training as flexible as possible, picking different days, different times, spreading it out, bringing in extra mock-up sessions later on.
Oh, sorry, I misunderstood that then. So the contract owners are our own people, not contract owners as in... Is it a case of going round to their desk with a diary and saying, putting it in front of them, saying, when are you free? You will go on this.
I guess so, although that's more for SLT to enforce than myself. So I do try and encourage wherever I can, and so does my team.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barton. There's a bit of a theme. Any other questions from members? Can I ask one then about some of the thresholds that we're setting out for when we're asking for policies for things? So it sort of pricked my ears when we talked about social value, but also decarbonisation. Some of those requirements are based on the value of the contract, and I sort of understand the logic for that. But would we, so I'm thinking about this as an opportunity to not just govern and enforce, but also encourage particularly local businesses, smaller businesses as well, to be applying for some of the contracts that we have with the council. And I run a small business myself. I'm not looking to apply for contracts with the council, obviously. But actually, you know, a £50,000 project for a small business is a good project. Being expected to create a decarbonisation plan as well actually starts to feel quite onerous. And I'm just wondering whether we should be thinking about our thresholds in terms of things like company turnover or type of contract. So I know this from bitter experience. I've produced lots of decarbonisation plans, social value plans for a relatively small business. Some of them, I will admit, ChatGPT has assisted me with. So whether they're actually very valuable in terms of the impact that we'd expect them to have, I don't know. But I'm just thinking, how can we create something that doesn't feel onerous for small businesses, encourages them to apply for business with the council, but actually has real impact rather than just ticking some boxes in the paperwork?
I'm completely open to that. That addition was not actually from my side. It came from the Climate Change Director, David Barber, when he did the amendments to the Code of Procurement Practice back in 2022. And it was introduced then. In all fairness, I'm not sure how many people have actually enforced that and made sure our suppliers have produced decarbonisation plans. But I think it's almost like we need to separate it out from the social value piece, because there's social value offerings that small organisations can provide that will add benefit that is completely separated from a decarbonisation plan. And you've also got to think about the global market and how realistic is it to expect small companies to be able to get to that position where they're carbon neutral when, in fact, you know, even bigger companies are struggling with that. And there are different things we can do, different ways we can do it. For example, the framework that we've just launched last year for our print, that encourages a lot of SMEs onto that framework, and the way it's decarbonised is through the framework mechanism itself rather than the supplier having to meet net zero carbon. So it's just about thinking about it differently. But yeah, I'm more than happy to, if SLT are open to it, revisit that point and potentially look at removing it or changing the threshold.
Well, thank you. Councillor Chilvers, have you got a view on that for portfolio holder?
No, and it's not something that I'm particularly engaged with before, so I'm kind of interested to follow that discussion. I think you've got to try and make things as appropriate for the threshold as possible, because you want the best company doing it, and if it's a small thing, you don't want overly onerous paperwork. So it's trying to find that sweet spot, and we need people that are gifted in administration to find the way to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Chilvers. Mr. Rollins, then we'll come to Councillor Armstrong.
Yes, just picking up the point in the procurement reform action plan, we do have considering the opportunities to remove barriers as a particular point. Obviously that's against 26-27, so as part of that piece of work we can look at how we can feed this into that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins. Councillor Armstrong.
It's on the same point actually, but just as a suggestion then, could the council have some guidance that gave examples of what a decarbonisation plan could be that's scaled in complexity based on the business size or turnover or however you want to do it? So if we're providing a simple basic option a small business could just take from our guidance, that might be an easy way to get around this without having to get too specific about different things and levels.
Definitely something that I think we can talk to the climate change team about, because they're the ones that have been leading on the decarbonisation plans for the council as a whole, and therefore the ones that have been leading on it for suppliers as well. So yeah, definitely something we can talk to them about.
Great, thank you. Members, any other questions? Or right, we'll wrap this one up. Thank you, Rebecca, for coming to talk to us, and also the work on the paper, which was really, really helpful. So thank you very much. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, should you wish. Right. Sorry, the agenda this evening is rather complicated, which I'm just trying to make sure I follow it in the right way. So, item 6 on the agenda was meant to be the commercial strategy scoping paper. I'm not going to embarrass Mr. Rollins by coming to him, because I know we've had a discussion about this before, but chatting with Andrew the other day, what we're going to do is actually going to try and meet up next week to go through where we are with the paper, the work done to date, and just work out where we go from here in terms of getting something in front of committee. We're aware it has been some time since we were promised it, but we hope to see it. But as I say, I'll take that offline with Andrew and we'll have a separate discussion about it. Okay, right. Item 7, we're into the cabinet agenda. We are going to start. We're going to start with item 4, which is the annual Treasury Management Strategy Statement, and then we'll also move quickly into item 9 as well, which is the quarter 3 budget updates for 2025 and 2026. These are 2 items which, as a committee, we should be making sure we're getting to, because they are obviously important to how the council finances run. So we're going to start off with item 4. I'm going to ask Richard Wilson, who's the principal accountant, just to give us highlights of the paper. Again, assume members have read this. We've had some very good training on it previously as well. So, that's good news. So, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. This report is a statutory one that has to be approved by the 31st of March by full council. So it always goes to Cabinet, and I think it's always pulled in by a scrutiny committee. It covers quite a lot of aspects. There's a few sort of indicators, both prudential and treasury management, that are contained within this report. And one of the key underlying principles is the capital financing requirement, which is basically anything that's in the capital programme that hasn't been funded by other resources. So it's borrowing. There's 2 main aspects in terms of treasury management. There's the borrowing side, which is Public Works Loan Board, predominantly long-term, and obviously those are being affected by the interest rates staying high and likely to stay higher than originally envisaged in this paper. The other side is the investment side. So we have different investment strategies and the types of investments that we undertake. On that side, the general fund is likely to earn slightly more than we've put in this paper because interest rates are going to stay higher. But it's probably less good news for the HRA that's a main borrower and Milverton Homes. So I'll just add those points in, but leave it to questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Richard. Members, questions on this? Where are we going to start? Councillor Phillips, you saved me from asking one.
I'm just wondering whether we can get an idea of the sensitivity to higher interest rates for longer. How much an extra, say, 0.1% would impact the funding?
I don't have those figures to hand. It would be a case of working out the pros and the cons, the ups and the downs. So the borrowing will impact more on, say, the HRA than the investment income going up. But I haven't actually got any analysis of those figures at this point.
If you don't mind me being broken on following up to that, it would be useful for us as the Housing Scrutiny Committee when we next meet in 2 weeks' time, I think it is, if we'd had an idea of the impact on the HRA. Thank you.
Mr. Leithley.
Hi, as part of the work that we're doing for the business plan, we are actually starting to look at all reports and doing the sensitivity within the reports. So any new reports that are coming out, we are actually showing if the interest rates went up by 0.5% or down by 0.5%, what that impact would actually be. And if it did go up, would this HRA business plan still be able to afford it or not? So we have actually started to incorporate that in going forward with all new plans, but we can get more information for that on the current business plan.
Okay, that sounds excellent, thank you.
And there is reference in the paper as well, Mr. Wilson, about the impact of Milverton Homes and the joint venture. Now, I don't want to stray into the territory of that paper yet because we're talking about the Milverton Homes business plan later, but that will be in confidential session. Is there anything that you can tell us at this point that would provide some reassurance about that, or help members understand the level of risk that's involved there without us having to go into confidential session?
I think I'll probably defer that one to Andrew Rollins.
Thanks, Richard. In terms of the impact on Milverton Homes, naturally, if we have to borrow at an increased rate, it means that the rate that we then set for Milverton Homes for their remaining tranches of their loans, which they've got about 14 tranches left until 2028 to take out on the 62 dwellings that they're purchasing, does mean that that will increase as well. And then that will have a corresponding adverse impact on their business plan, which we are going to be discussing later on in confidential session. The risk to that ultimately is if it does increase the cost in their business plan, there is a risk that it could make their business plan less viable going forward.
Okay, so that will be a general discussion that we'll want to come back to later. So I think members probably just note that point about the impact of interest rates. The other question I had, I think, which is one which we could ask probably on almost any item at the moment. So LGR, obviously, this Treasury management strategy, yes, it's for the year, but we're on a very long term. It has a long term view to it. What should we be worried about with LGR? Is there anything different that we need to be doing, because there is a prospect that the council will no longer exist in future?
One of the things I'm very conscious of as I'm doing the borrowing of Public Works Loan Board, for instance, is trying to stagger those so that the successor authority isn't landed with all of our money maturing at the same time. So I'm trying to do that. They'll obviously take over any of the debt as well as the investments of the council. So it shouldn't make too much difference. But obviously we'll have to be providing a lot of the underlying data, the capital finance requirement, etc., so for them to be able to come to a composite figure. But it doesn't really impact on our strategy in terms of we have a capital programme, we have level investments, etc., and we have to just manage those up to the handover point effectively.
Okay, and I'm assuming, which I know is always a bad thing to do, but I'm assuming that this is basically other councils will have a very similar approach, they will have a treasury management strategy as well that they are having to manage in the same way that we are.
Yeah, one of the useful things we get from MUFG, our Treasury Advisors, is the benchmarking group, and that has a number of councils and other bodies that join that. But it's very interesting how disparate a lot of the strategies are And in terms of what they invest, there are a number of district councils, say on that, that don't have a housing revenue account and don't have any external borrowing at all and have lots of investments. So it's a case of the districts in Warwickshire might not come to it from the same position as, I think when we looked at the merger with Stratford, they didn't have any debt. So if it was a north-south one, that would kind of change the impact a bit. And obviously the county does borrowing differently to probably us as well. So it would be a merger of the different risk appetites of the different bodies.
Okay, so a little bit of work to do that. Councillor Barton.
Well, it's more of a, not really a question. I suppose that all we can do is carry on with our beliefs. But when LGR goes through, the incoming council will probably have a completely different view. And then it's up to them, isn't it? We can only carry on the same track we're on. Like you say, when we tried to merge with Stratford, our values were so different that we couldn't match up. But in 24 months' time, we're going to have to. Or somebody's going to have to, because we probably won't be here. So it's very difficult.
Yeah, it's one of the challenges of the Treasury management strategy and things such as the MTFS, where we're ultimately presenting as if we are a going concern, knowing that if things go as expected, we are not going to be a going concern, but we just still have to present things as if we are going to exist. So in this case, some of the values go to 40 years within that, and within the MTFS 5 years, which we know if everything goes planned by 2028, this council will no longer exist.
To be fair, in 40 years' time, the successor council may not exist, because that's what we're dealing with. Councillor Luckhurst.
Thank you, Chair. Is the current sort of uncertainty in the running of Warwick County Council giving any cause of concern with LGR, or is it just not on our radar?
That doesn't really have any impact on the Treasury management strategy at all, no.
Good to know, thank you.
That might be a question for the LGR paper. Right, okay. Any, Councillor Kohler?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the report. In 5.2 on page 14, it's got a table of the projected interest rates. I think you mentioned that they're, well, dare we say it's out of date? Oh, yeah. Do we have any indication of how much they're likely to change by? Because it's presumably that, because I'm trying to find it again now. The first column was it March this year? Was it April this year? One of those. So is it out of date already in the very first column of that, or are we expecting a bump later in the year?
There was an instant kick up in long-term interest rates. Gilts shot up as soon as the Iran war started, and public works loan board rates shot up straight away as well. So our borrowing costs for March instantly jumped compared with these tables, and we don't really know how quickly they might come down. The expectation is that probably for 26, 27 they'll certainly be a lot higher than that initial table. It doesn't really change our strategy, it just means that the underlying borrowing and investment returns are going to sort of change. The expectation is this Thursday that base rate now, rather than falling, will probably stay the same, although there is an up risk on that as well. So it does mean that all of this table is now effectively out of the water, but it feels a bit like when COVID first hit again, that instantly blew the tables that we put in that report, and then the Ukraine war did the same. So that's the world we live in, that whatever you print, you know it's not going to not happen.
Yeah, thank you for that, cheery reminders. But yes, it's, I very much take the point. When talking about treasury management and borrowing in the past, we kind of talked about trying to produce something that makes it clear that although we've got a large amount that's borrowed as a council, there are assets that it's secured against, and trying to come up with something that presents how those linkages exist. Is that something that is being worked on and we'll see in the fullness of time?
Because of the pooled nature of the borrowing, that is very difficult to put any asset behind it. You can do it, say, with Milverton Homes, and any borrowing to Milverton Homes. But for the HRA, for instance, a lot of the borrowing is for renewal of existing assets rather than just replacement assets, and you can't match any asset in any year with the spend and the borrowing associated with that. Whether Andrew would add anything to that?
Yeah, and in terms of the HRA as well, you've got the assets are not as liquid as they would be if they were a traditional investment asset because of the assured tenancy. So they typically on the asset register carry an EUV value of, is it 40%? 40% of their economic value if they were to be sold on the open market. So in theory, you can attribute the borrowing to the value of the assets that are carried on the balance sheet, but it's as Richard said, it's not as like for like in terms of we borrow to purchase these, we borrow to invest in this stock.
I guess, particularly, we don't need to retread old ground, but the basic thought in my head at some point was that we have all of this borrowing over here, and a lot of it is secured, very, very secure. So although we've got some scary numbers in terms of how much we've borrowed, a lot of it is very, very secure. And then there are other bits which are secured in other ways. And it was trying to, every year we present, this is the amount of debt that we have, but we don't then say, but, don't worry about the size of that figure, because that's secured against, there's all this that it's secured against. Maybe the actual stuff that is less concretely secured, trying to come up with an estimate of what that might be.
I think that the key metric for that will be the HRA business plan in particular. So the borrowing predominantly is on the HRA. And so as long as the HRA business plan shows that that borrowing is affordable, then that is one of the most important metric, I'd say, rather than what it's actually secured against in terms of any assets.
Thank you, Councillor Kohler. Any other questions on this one? Councillor Barton.
Yeah, sort of on that point, can I ask then, are all our borrowings fixed at the moment? And are we looking to borrow anything in the near future?
Yes, all of our Public Works Loan Board borrowing is maturity fixed, so the interest rates are fixed for the life. Traditionally, for Housing Revenue Account, we used to go for 40-year loans, so they were fixed over the whole period. Because interest rates are so high at the moment, it's cheaper to do internal borrowing and borrow shorter on the assumption that hopefully in, say, 5 years' time, you'll be able to re-borrow at maturity cheaper than if you'd borrowed for 40 years at the higher rate now, and there's a carrying cost. We do have to keep borrowing. I think we've borrowed £62 million in 25-26 so far, and there's potential that we might have to borrow a bit more before the 31st of March, and then in 26-27 as well. So the borrowing isn't going to stop anytime soon. And you have that point that you have to borrow at a certain point when the cash runs out. So you're a bit of a hostage to what the interest rates are at the time. We have a little bit of movement when we can pick and choose around a day or so. Even morning and afternoon rates vary from the Public Works Loan Board. But you've got quite a small sort of like window of opportunity to pick the right time within that requirement.
I hope you sleep at night.
I think if you've done the job long enough, you drop a lot of the noughts on the end of the numbers and just, it becomes more manageable.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you. Following up on that, firstly, I think we've forgotten just how low the interest rates are these days, when those of us who had mortgages in the early 90s had 17 or 15%, but that's not the point. It's a combination of the two questions, with the LGR going on and with costs rising in the short term. Are we fixing for very short periods, or are we still fixing for 40 years for the HRA, for example? Because it may well be that in 2 years' time, when everything's gone down, interest rates will be lower than they are today. And if we fix now at a higher rate, we're paying more than we should do.
Yes, certainly at the moment, all the loans I've done in the last 12 months for the housing revenue account, for instance, they do have this 0.4% certainty rate reduction for the HRA, but I'm doing anywhere between sort of like 2 to 10 years for all of the HRA, just because we have that expectation that rates will come down. It's just a few loans where we have to go slightly longer. I think Milton Homes did one that was a much longer one, but that was their board decision at the time. So yes, it is. We're going short at the moment on the expectation that when we refinance those, it will be cheaper than if we bought or borrowed 40 years now. So our normal policy has been reduced quite a lot.
I think your challenge is whatever successor authority we have, you will be blamed for whichever way it goes. So, yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Luckhurst, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick follow-up on what Councillor Phillips was saying. I'm going to quote Martin Lewis, there's no real reason to assume that interest rates are going to come down long term. I was trying to, I think it's an AI response I found that the historical average is 9.1%. That's AI, so who knows, that might be, we'll come to that later. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. Mr. Leithley.
Within the HRA business plan, where the majority of the borrowing is doing, we obviously have the loans that Richard's put between 2 and 10 years. We then estimate them on a long-term 40-year repayment loan. We have been quite prudent in going a higher interest rate on the hope that it will be lower than that, and the HRA business plan will benefit from it. But we haven't just put in a 2%, for instance. We've actually looked at trying to be more sensible about that.
We've also tried to be mindful as well of not having a lot of rescheduling at the same time. So I'll say we're not, again, as Richard said, held hostage to particular rates that are given snapshot in time in future. So we try to make sure that that's spread quite evenly across those future years, which is why some of the lengths that Richard takes out differ depending on the value and the timing that he takes it out.
Great, thank you. Right, I think we'll wrap that up there. I think, are we happy with, so we've got some comments specifically about housing, making sure this goes to housing scrutiny. With a, yeah, go on.
Thank you, Chair. So the one which came up quite early in the debate was the Overview and Scrutiny Committee asked that the Housing Scrutiny Committee are informed at their next meeting in 2 weeks on the impact of volatility of the volatility of interest rates on the delivery of the housing revenue account. I think that's what Peter said.
I think that's more or less right, Mr. Leach. Yes, it's really just make sure that, as Councillor Melrose has each time asked, have you got sufficient funds, that we still have sufficient funds to do what we need to do with the regulator.
Great, thank you both. Can I also suggest that firstly we make an additional comment thanking officers for their work on this. It is a complex piece, but actually it's actually always really well explained, and I think we should record that we were confident with the information that's we've been presented, and that the appropriate strategy and plans are in place for us over the next 12 months. Okay, thank you. We'll move straight on. I think then we'll go to item 9, which is the Q3 budget update, to stay on the finance topic. Mr. Wilson, you're welcome to stay for this if you wish to. But I'll go to Stephen Leithley, Strategic Finance Manager, and Councillor Chilvers as well. Stephen, are you giving us the introduction on this one?
Hi, so we're presenting the Q3 budget update for financial year 2024-25. Within the report, it's currently showing that the general fund is showing an over budget of 711,000. The HRA budget is showing over budget of 870,000. Compared to Q3, the general fund has actually improved and reduced by the overspend by 257,000, where the HRA has actually increased its overspend within those 2 quarters. Within the report, it breaks it down to first the general fund. We break down by department and the changes and each area of significance where an overspend is, comparing it to the previous quarter for both general fund and HRA. The report also then will break down and show you the current capital expenditure. Within the capital, we have a reduction in year of spending of 4.4 million on general fund and a reduction of around 11 million on HRA. This isn't actually a reduction in spend within the capital fund, it's a reduction in spend within the financial year. It's more of a phasing. So some projects have been delayed and have been phased into next year and future years. So the total capital fund hasn't actually reduced, it's just when we're spending it. This report only takes us up to the 31st of March. So I'd like to open up to any questions.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Barton, straight in.
That was very quick. Can you just explain, I didn't get lost, but the variance after reserves, the 711, could you just explain that again a bit more slowly and a bit more, please?
Certainly. So when we've done the Q3 budget monitoring, it's shown the initial position of the general fund was just over £1 million overspent. But within that, we already had approved reserve movements. So certain things that we knew were going to overspend, but were going to be funded from earmarked reserves that we already had available. So in this report, what we're trying to show is what the actual effect is on the bottom line of the general fund, the unfunded element of the overspend. So we take off what's been funded, already previously agreed through reserves, to then bring us to the 711,000.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the biggest sort of negative variance on this from Q2 was the parking in the neighbourhood section, right? And that was put down, if I read it correctly, to the reduction in spaces in Covent Garden. But the pre-scrutiny questions sort of very specifically showed that parking hadn't reduced as a result of Covent Garden. There's a bit of an inconsistency there. Is there any comment you can make on it, or is this too much into the specifics?
I don't have those answers at the moment. If you have a question, you can give it to me and I can come back to you with a full answer on it.
That would be appreciated, because it is the biggest variance in the report and the reasons aren't really holding up.
I will say with that, I've been dealing and talking with the head of service for parking and the service managers of parking to look at how we can actually support within finance to give them better information, to provide a more consistent approach from the metrics that they have of who's coming into the car park, what tickets been bought, and the financials of what's actually going into the ledger. We are working at the moment, certainly for the new year reporting, to revise how they forecast, to give us more information, to take us more reliance on what's actually coming out.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. It's a brief question, please, on a niche area. I was looking at the point at 2.8.6 on policy and development, page 7. It talks there about the budget for the parish neighbourhood plans, which of course are held when they do take place within the boundaries of the parish council area where they apply, notwithstanding that it's only something that happens very, very rarely indeed. Does that budget take into account the possibility of a parish council holding a referendum on a separate issue or having a consultation through a referendum on an issue that is not connected with the neighbourhood plan? Is that accommodated for in the budget setting, that possibility? Thank you.
I think Graham. Mr. Leach, sorry.
Through you, Chair, the only other potential option would be for a parish to hold a parish poll. I'm going to jinx this now and I'll be in a lot of trouble, but in the history of Warwick District Council, there has only ever been one parish poll. So I think the probability of that is low. If I remember correctly, at that point, that was funded by the parish itself as well. That was where the recharge was. But parish polls are uniquely different to every other type of election. The polling hours are very limited, as are the requirements for a number of aspects you'd expect. There's no postal votes as well, as an example. So the costs are actually a lot lower.
Great, thank you, Councillor Payne. Can I ask about we've had a common theme, haven't we, I think, on the adverse variance on the homelessness rent rebates. That's been I seem to remember when we've looked at these before. It's been a consistent theme. Do we see that changing at all, or is that a result of central government policy, Mr. Rollins?
In terms of spend, we don't see that changing. We still see there being pressures on that service. Where we may see changes is that we made increased provision through the budget for 26-27 going forward to support that area. So one would hope that that is enough money to support it in 26-27, but we are sort of at the mercy of demand in that area.
Okay, but it sounds like we've effectively adjusted our plan for next year so that actually, in theory, we shouldn't see these significant variances next year, but that will depend on what the demand is for homeless services, basically. Okay, great. Any other questions? Councillor Kohler.
Thank you very much. I've latched onto table 2.4 on page 9, which is in 2.11, reserve movements. I was just trying to understand a little bit. So 2 rows sprang out at me. One was Sherborne Recycling Centre, where my reading, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the contribution to reserves from Sherborne Recycling has dipped by 70,000 between Q3 and Q2. So I just want to validate that my reading of that's right. And 2 rows lower, where we've got strategic leadership, climate emergency, rather than a 53,000 contribution, it's 149 drawdown. Is that right, or is it the other way around?
No, that's correct. So what it's shown is within the Sherborne Recycling, we're going to need less reserves to actually fund it. That's because the rebate is coming back better than what we were expecting. So we originally had a budget which was supplemented by the reserve for what it wasn't making in previous years. I think we hit what we were expecting this year in the first 3 quarters, so it's actually been a benefit to us. Within the climate emergency, this whole cost centre within climate emergency, any overspends and underspends will just go straight into the reserve to be held and ring-fenced for climate emergency. I believe the majority of this, I don't know exactly which project it is, but there is one project that's been delayed until next year. So the money is going to be put back in the reserve and then withdrawn again after April to be able to complete that project.
Thank you very much. That's very, very helpful. Just to go back on the Sherborne Recycling Centre, so we are 70,000 lower in Q3 than in Q2. I thought you said that the rebate income we're getting is now better, but in 2.11.3 it says income has improved but remains lower than budget. So can you just clarify where we are versus budget?
We still are lower than budget, but we're closer to the budget than what we predicted in Q2.
Thank you. I'm there now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Kohler. Any other questions, members? Councillor Bond.
Yeah. A couple of things close to my heart. The Spa Centre. That's 15,000 down in Q3. I thought I saw somewhere that the Spa Centre was doing reasonably well. Does that mean it's still doing a loss?
The figures are showing this. I don't have the details of exactly what that 15,000 represents, but I can find that out and go back to the service and get a full explanation of it.
Okay, thanks. Just wondering if it was a gas bill they received. The other one, the Jeffson Gardens. I know the restaurant's closed. Is there any plans for the Jeffson Gardens restaurant? Obviously, it will cost us if we keep it shut. So, is there any plans for it?
I think that'd be slightly unfair to it. Yeah, go on.
Thank you, Councillor Barton. Yeah, I can sort of say the asset and neighbourhood teams are currently working on options for that building at the moment, and there will be hopefully a plan brought forward shortly. But we can probably put this potentially in the item if you're interested as part of the work plan.
Yep, sounds like a good idea. Any other questions? Right, okay. Can I suggest on this, again, we sort of, record some comments that obviously echo our thanks to officers. I think we've all found over the last few years, actually, the quality of the papers in finance are actually really understandable now, which is really important for us. And I know we're all grateful for those. So I think if we record our thanks to officers for their work on bringing forward the report, and then also our confidence that that the budget is in a good situation. Councillor Barton, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just one more thing. On homelessness and housing advice, 423 favourable. That seems a lot of money left over, considering homelessness apparently is going up. And we find this service...
When we looked into this, the initial part of this was additional grants that we'd received. So what we'll be looking at, what grants need to be ring-fenced to go forward for work that is actually available and work that needs to be done. So we are working on that now as part of the closure of the accounts and the outturn of the accounts to see how much of that is required going forward within that service or within an overall underspend. Could I also just say the last part is, obviously this is the last quarterly report of the year. We'll be starting them again for Q1. If you have any comments or any requests or additional information or changes that you would require, if you could let us know, we'll try and best to incorporate it. We have a few improvements that we're going to be bringing into next year with a bit more information. So if there is anything else, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kohler, did you want to add something?
It was a comment, it's not a question. It's just that I don't feel satisfied with the level of scrutiny that I've given these papers. Well, I know that the Audit and Standards Committee gets all of the audit papers, and back in the good old days, as I would describe them, all finance papers went to finance and audit. And I do pine for those days, and giving the length of our agenda, when we comment back to Cabinet about scrutiny in general, I would suggest that we should also comment that I don't think our finance scrutiny is up to standard.
Thank you, Councillor Kohler. I'm happy to raise that concern. I'm not sure how other members feel about that. I don't necessarily wish to prolong the meeting any longer than it's going to go on, but I don't know if members have got immediate thoughts they want to respond to that. Councillor Phillips.
It's an interesting point, and we have the budget review group, which meets sort of 3 or 4 times a year, where there's something could be done between the two groups to increase the scrutiny on finance. And maybe Councillor Chilvers, you have some opinion on that, but I think the budget review group certainly helps when we do go to a little bit more detail, give you a bit more of a difficult time, Councillor Chilvers, but that's what it's there for.
Okay. I am going to move us on. I think otherwise we're going to get stuck here in the ground that we have trodden before. Right, I think. Just trying to work out where I am in the agenda now. Sorry, just give me a moment. So we've done procurement. We've done item 4. Right, okay, so we're actually back to item 7, which I'm going to come to Councillor Kohler on, because this was a soft call-in of the service area plan from the Lib Dem group. Councillor Kohler, do you just want to give the background and what we wanted to raise as a comment there?
Sorry, trying to regather my train of thought on that one. I believe that it was particularly around the housing service area plan, and particularly, I guess, I was surprised when I read the service area plan that there was just one comment in it about mould and damp, given the changes that happened last year to the law in terms of AWAB's law coming into place, and given that the one case that I've been involved in, we seem to fall quite a way short of AWAB's law. I was expecting more actions to be in that service area plan. I guess the feedback I got through the overview, the pre-scrutiny questions, was that there was perhaps more hidden under the surface of the area plan than it was letting on. But yeah, that was the point I was really wanting to explore. And perhaps, given that there's the Housing Scrutiny Committee in 2 weeks' time, perhaps it's a hospital pass over to Housing Scrutiny Committee to pick that one up.
Thank you, Councillor Coder. Do you want to follow up on that, Mr. Knight?
Thank you, Councillor Clough. Just on behalf of the Housing Service, you've got the service area plan for housing, but underneath that we've got a regulatory action plan, which from memory had about 103 actions in it. So that is a substantial document, and that gets reported through to Housing Scrutiny Committee. The Scrutiny Committee, Housing Scrutiny Committee have asked they did the policy review of the damp and mould policy when it went, and they've asked obviously to keep an eye on progress in terms of compliance. The Housing Service ultimately will not get to a C1 rating unless we're compliant with damp, mould and condensation. It's something also that the regulator of social housing also monitors their progress with in our monthly meetings with them. And within the full key performance report for housing, there is 2 or 3 indicators being put online to monitor progress as well. So that information can be provided to you, Councillor Cole, if that would be helpful. But yes, I think it'd be good. It's an area already on the Housing Scrutiny Committee's agenda, and I think it will continue to be until there's assurance in that area of work.
So I think what we're asking as a committee is that we get some assurance that Housing Scrutiny will get a chance to look at the service area plan, particularly in reference to damp and mould and our compliance with AWAB's law. As you're here, Councillor Phillips, are you happy to take that one into?
Yes, absolutely. I can't remember off the top of my head whether we've got AWAB's law on next in 2 weeks' time. I would think we probably have just a verbal update, but I have seen 1 or 2 emails recently about how it's working or not. So I certainly definitely want a verbal update, even if it's not actually on the plan. But when we look at the agenda, we will make sure that's going to be covered.
Great, thank you. Councillor Davison.
Told by Head of Housing it's on for May.
Thank you, Councillor Davison. You.
Great, okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Coder, for bringing that one in as well. Right, next item we're going to go to then is item 8, which is the local government reorganisation update. I called this in as chair, really because I think members, as you've read the papers, will have noticed we have been asked to actually provide some input and views into the spatial development strategy and the options for the Foundation Strategic Authority as well. So that's what I think officers will be looking for from us this evening. I'm sure there might be other questions about local government reform, but if we can try and sort of keep our focus on that bit of the discussion, I think that would be helpful. I'd like to try and get this through in about 30 minutes, maybe 45 maximum, because we've still got quite a lot to get through on the agenda. I'm going to come to Mr. Elliott, I think, on this to give us a brief introduction to the paper and what support you'd like from committee this evening.
Thank you. I mean, the report is divided, I suppose, into those which are arguably procedural in the sense of how we and the other local authorities in Warwickshire are seeking to organise ourselves in terms of trying to prepare for the work which local government reorganisation is going to create. It also seeks to set out some resources for some of the staffing issues, and here the issue is how do we, and this is a challenge for all local authorities, but how do we continue to do the day job, whether that's collecting the bins, cutting the grass, whatever, doing our projects, continue to do that, which you as councillors want us to do, and yet also have the capacity to deal with basically a major organisational change on a scale which, well, last time it happened was just over 50 years ago. And part of that is to enhance the capacities as officers to be able to do that. It also sets out a proposal for how, I suppose, from a political point of view, there's already lots of stuff happening, and it will happen, and will probably escalate further. What can we put in place to engage, if you like, political leadership? So there's a proposal for a local government reorganisation member programme board with 2 members from the administration, 2 from the opposition. And I think we have the nominations now, which for members are Councillor Davison, Councillor Melrose, Councillor Day and Councillor Bode have been put forward, so I understand it. So that hopefully will be formally confirmed tomorrow. Then I suppose in terms of the other issues, these are more laterally ones. They are linked to local government reorganisation. One is the government's proposals around special development strategy areas, and linked to that, it's asking for expressions of interest for foundation strategic authorities. And this kind of goes back to the purpose of the devolution white paper, which was to cover the whole of England with strategic authorities to which the government would devolve powers, responsibilities and funding. Although in that white paper it said, but we've got to do local government reorganisation first, or at least involve it. However, in the middle of a consultation on the options, which is the other thing, of local government reorganisation in Warwickshire, and I kind of left that to last because you know what they are. There's only 2 options in Warwickshire. We're fortunate compared to many other areas where it ranges from 3 to 5 options. So I think in the middle of that consultation, the government have started another consultation, but with the same end period, which is helpful or not. And we have discussed this before as members, both at this committee and indeed at Cabinet, the whole kind of issue about, well, to which area would we belong? And there is a link between the spatial development strategy areas and the strategic authority areas, where the government has said they don't necessarily have to be coterminous, but they should be. And this links to effectively the powers, if you like, of what they would eventually envisage to be for a mayor for those areas. And this has been a discussion amongst all of the leaders of the 6 councils in Warwickshire, and you have a copy of the letter which all leaders now sent to the Secretary of State, which I paraphrase, and Councillor Davison may wish to add, but effectively is, well, until you make a decision about local government reorganisation, it's too early for us to be able to comment on this, because what might be the right answer really depends upon what answer you give about local government reorganisation. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but I think effectively that's it. Oh, and can we come and see you to talk to you about it? So those are probably the 3 bits. I haven't dwelt actually upon the local government reorganisation bit itself, because basically the government has just repeated back to us what we gave it at the end of November. Nothing different has actually happened, so in the report, haven't particularly made a big deal of it, because I'm suggesting to you it's kind of almost see what we said to you in November, although the way the consultation is phrased doesn't quite allow us to do that. There's about 5 or 6 questions in the consultation, but we'll do that, and we'll do that via a draft response, and basically to expedite it, suggesting as we do on the delegation, it's to me, but in effect that's with the member development group effectively to do that. So happy to go down into any more detail on any of those areas. Should you wish, of course, I'll be very happy to, but I'm not sure you've got enough time.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Councillor Davison, do you want to add?
Just to focus on, you said specifically about the STS areas and the strategic authorities. You saw in the letter that was sent yesterday, In terms of strategic authorities, I think everyone's agreed it needs to involve Coventry, and that it may well be that we put in, as well as that letter, saying that's where the strategic development, the area should be. So North and South Warwickshire, Coventry, and I would put Solihull in, but you may have a slightly different thing. In terms of the foundation, the strategic authority, we can say the same thing. The answer is likely to be no, but we may want to say the same thing. And then I would suggest we here would say, if that's not an option, then we're looking either to Worcestershire or Oxfordshire. That would be my view, and it would be good to hear other people's views.
Right, thank you, Councillor Davison. So there's effectively a hypothesis on the table for the strategic development strategy, spatial development strategy, sorry, which is the Warwickshire, Coventry, Solihull, Solihull or not, which may or may not be the same as the strategic authority direction, and then we'll go from there. Right, okay. Members' questions. Councillor Gorman, then Nicola, then Armstrong. Councillor Gorman.
Thank you. So do you think there's more chance that the government will be more positive with the spatial development areas versus the foundation strategic authorities?
I think you could, I suppose, do a comparative about being more positive, but you would think you might be starting from a very low base on both of them. The way the government have phrased or actually displayed it on the special development strategy is literally Warwickshire's been put in the grey area. So within the body of the report, I did the excerpt of the map covering most of England. And basically, which might be, I suppose, me being perhaps pessimistic, but it kind of feels like the grey areas are the bits of the country the government doesn't actually quite know what to do with. And there is a real danger, I would say, that if we're not careful, we get stuck with other areas simply because of administrative convenience, not because that actually it's particularly logical. So, for example, if you go and look at the map, to the east of us, there are two unitaries making up what was the ceremonial county of Northamptonshire. Well, if you look at, well, where do they go if they don't go? If the government doesn't want a devolution island, and you kind of think, well, all right, it adjoins Warwickshire, but I think the only thing we've really got in common is the fact that with the A14 joins the M6 and the M1, just at the border of Warwickshire and Northamptonshire. Beyond that, I'm not quite sure I actually see it from a functional economic or social geography point of view, what there is in common. Yet actually put the two together and you get to about the population that the government are seeking for these areas, which is circa 1.5 million. And that's the fear, certainly from my point of view. If you look at the data, purely being data-driven, then Coventry with Warwickshire is what works. If you look at how people lead their lives in terms of travel to work, travel to health facilities, travel to education, and so on, there is a high degree of self-containment in terms of travel patterns within the Coventry and Warwickshire sub-region, to probably a bit lesser degree with Solihull because of it kind of blends into the Birmingham urban area. So if you just look at what would a sensible economic geography would be, Coventry and Warwickshire is a slam dunk, in theory, but clearly that is not going to happen because there seems to be a very strong reluctance to take Coventry out of the combined authority. There seems to be an equally strong reluctance to put Warwickshire in the combined authority. And if that is then the case, where do we look? I'm afraid I've done this before, but if you go around the geography clock, start at 12 o'clock, and for Warwickshire, you then look north. Well, that might work for Nuneaton, North Warwickshire, but I don't think that works for Warwick District or Stratford. If you look at 3 o'clock eastwards to Northamptonshire, well, as I explained before, I mean, maybe rugby might benefit, but I don't see anything else. If you look at about 25 past the hour down Oxfordshire, I think there is a reasonable strong link there. I think that the nature of the economies, the communication links down the M40, the Chiltern line, you can see some communality there. Worcestershire, no, Gloucestershire, because there is a border with Gloucestershire, not with Warwick District. Maybe there's, all right, it's got rural patches and, you know, it shares the Cotswolds with the bottom end of Stratford, but not quite sure. And I think, in fairness, neither is Gloucestershire, either the other way. Worcestershire, clearly, much stronger. There are parts of Stratford which do have a strong relationship with Worcestershire. But if you go Worcestershire, you get Herefordshire as well, whether you like it or not, because Herefordshire hasn't got anywhere to go either. And I would kind of question what we actually have in common with Herefordshire, given the degree of sparseness. There's probably more sheep there than there are people, or cattle anyway. And so whichever way, there's no perfect geography. The most perfect one is with Coventry, but we are caught in a bind, which is why I think that the feeling was we shouldn't be making this decision just because the government have set a deadline of the 26th of March, when clearly there is almost a need to actually go and explain this situation. And the government could change the kind of cleft stick that we've got in terms of the relationship with Coventry. Now, that's not guaranteed to work, but why wouldn't you try? So I don't know that it answers your question about being more or less positive. I think the Foundation Strategic Authorities, the government has said there's no more money, you know, whatever money there is to be devolved down. In the period up to 2028, the civil servants, when they announced all of this, they said all of the money's allocated, that's it. So that devolution isn't going to immediately generate funding to come down. It might generate power and responsibilities, but it's not going to deliver, if you like, the kind of infrastructure funding that we see in some other areas. I think you've got exactly the same issue of geography about with Foundation Strategic Authority areas. It really will depend upon how far the government is prepared to be pragmatic about the circumstances of the local cases, or how far they're going to be rigid about imposing a set pattern across the whole country. I'm sorry that doesn't give you the nice, easy, short answer, but there isn't a nice, easy, short answer.
Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Gorman?
I do, thank you. That was a very helpful question, but I'm wondering, are we as a council failing to be pragmatic by continuing to focus on Coventry, which is looking incredibly unlikely, and should we instead be focusing more on proposing a solution that the government's more likely to accept, such as Hereford and Worcestershire, because we run the risk of just being given the worst case scenario for us if we keep concentrating on Coventry.
Well, if I may, just before Councillor Davison comes in, this kind of comes back to what is the answer for local government reorganisation, because one can see that for South Warwickshire, a linkage through to Worcestershire and Herefordshire might have benefits. But if you're in Nuneaton and Bedworth, it doesn't have any ring of truth at all. So if you had a single county-wide unitary, where would you put Warwickshire with? And that was part of the reasoning why the leaders felt that, well, actually, until we get an answer to the local government reorganisation question, it's really difficult to work out what actually would be the best answer in terms of special development strategy areas, because there is a real risk you put at jeopardy one part of the county over the other. Now, it's not the county's fault, don't get me wrong, I'm not criticising the county council, but just the geography of Warwickshire, because it is split, because it does stretch quite a long way. I mean, the northern part of Warwickshire has got a border with Derbyshire. You know, we stretch from basically kind of the North Country all the way down to Gloucestershire and the southwest. That does mean quite a lot in terms of the impact upon communities. And I think that's why I would say I can see the issue if we If you split Warwickshire in two, you've got a lot more options you can think about. But if it's just one, then you haven't. And until you know which one it is, it's really difficult to work out what will be the optimum solution.
Councillor Davison.
Thank you, Councillor Gorman. I think you're saying, even if we think we shouldn't answer the consultation because it's the wrong time, we should, because at least we're then putting our views forwards, and I would agree with that. So, as our Chief Exec said already, whether the unit is one unitary or two does alter the options that could be done for strategic authorities, but we still should put them in what they should be. And as put in the letter, and our Chief Exec's already said, if there are two unitaries, for us, we can look to either Oxfordshire or Worcestershire. I don't think that's credible if it's a single unitary authority for the reasons just given. So I think we are then arguing that it's the weird beast that the strategic authority is the same as the unitary, because it's very hard to see what else would happen. Now, I'm partly arguing that because I'm keen on the two unitary option, which most of us voted for, and saying that is a reason to go for two unitaries.
Any more, Councillor Gorman? Okay, I think I've got Councillor Coda, then Councillor Armstrong, then Councillor Stone.
Firstly, just as a point of clarification, the letter that was circulated to councillors yesterday, are we happy to put that in the public domain and publish it as perhaps an addendum to the Cabinet report? That be, so that, yeah, we're all talking about it, and I believe it's okay, so can we publish it? I'm getting nods for those on the watching on video.
I'm going to say that's a yes that we've had, unless anyone contradicts me.
Excellent. Do I remember that, I can't remember where it was, whether it was in the original white paper or one of the other pieces that has come down from on high, but was there a golden rule talked about at some point that said you couldn't split up a county council and have some of it go into one strategic authority and other parts of it go into a different strategic authority?
It's been alleged that that's the case, but no evidence whatsoever has been found to support it. I can't imagine why.
So it's true that it's a rumour. Excellent.
It's true that it's a rumour. I can confirm that.
I guess one thought goes, I was just looking through, can't remember which appendix it is. Oh yeah, Appendix 4, I think it is, that details out what the powers would be of a foundation strategic authority. And they're obviously they're more limited than a mayoral or an established strategic authority, the other tiers, but there's still quite a lot that it would do. So, you know, local transport authority, for example, some consolidation of local transport funding, priority for engagement with Great British Railways, all sorts of things then around skills and employment support, housing and strategic planning, economic development and regeneration. So there's quite a lot, even at the foundation level, that a foundation strategic authority would be responsible for. And you know, say we were, as a South Warwickshire, going off with Worcestershire and Herefordshire, and therefore we were across the strategic authority trying to talk to Great British Railway about improving railway lines across the authority. There aren't railway lines that go across that authority. They all go in other directions. So what would it do? It just seems nonsensical to me. It seems that on the one hand, we have geography and economics, and on the other hand, we have politics. And politics is trying to ignore geography and economics, and politics needs to grow up and get real.
I'll let you respond to that, Councillor Davison.
Thank you. I pretty well agree with all of that, Councillor Kohler, that the government is being very brave, trying to say that, trying to have a nice, neat system, and they're chucking in police, fire, health, and everything else as well in the grand plan, and it doesn't really work very well. So I think you or we need our crystal balls out and to see what we think might come of these. I mean, one scenario is foundation strategic authorities that have no money won't do very much, and then another government comes along and, you know, they don't do anything. The complete opposite is that they suddenly get popular and lots of money comes in. Obviously, if significant amounts of money come in, then the rail links and so on that you were suggesting might be feasible if Warwickshire or South Warwickshire was connected with Worcestershire. But that could well be a pipe dream.
I guess the old rail maps I've looked at, Beeching did his bit for links between Stratford and down to Gloucestershire. And I believe there are several housing estates now on that land, so it could be done, I guess, but it doesn't sound like it's a current priority. It just feels like if we aren't careful, we'll be creating something that is just trying to do things that just aren't sensible at the end of the day.
Councillor Davis.
It's not us doing that creating, though, is it, Councillor Kohler? It's a government idea, and as I say, I think they're being optimistic on what it will do. I think on the alternative, the links obviously are with the conurbation, the West Midlands, particularly Coventry, and if we are within them, so if we're in the West Midlands Combined Authority, that is established, that is spending literally billions of pounds on regeneration, and I think probably a good thing. I've no idea if it's well spent or not, but I suspect that will continue if we join them. So I'm not sure that much benefit would come our way, because the deprivation, the need for the money is elsewhere, and I'd suspect it would continue to go that way.
But we might get to build more houses, that might be a benefit. I guess, so on that line, have we been building our relationships with the West Midland Combined Authority and with the Mayor and trying to talk to him and try and gauge his temperature in terms of what their thoughts are and what they might be open to over the fullness of time, and if they are courageous and all those other words?
Councillor Davison.
It's a while ago now, but the Mayor was just down the corridor with us and had a good, I thought, very open chat about his views on this, which was basically no, but we could, you know, look for links, and we do have links, like with the investment zone and so on. I really liked his reasoning. I mean, the job's big enough, and he tries to get round all the areas, the constituent authorities, and if it gets expanded, and if us, well, why not Worcestershire, why not Staffordshire? You know, it's quite a big area, and he feels that is sort of moving away from its purpose, so I think all credit to him for saying that. Obviously, it's not entirely his view. Things come along and so on. In terms of forging links, what I'm doing now, I thought this would come up before council, not here, but fine. What I am engaging in is in the investment zone. So I do try and go to those meetings. They're smaller. I can participate. I even have a vote, not that it's of any value at all. And so I think getting some links there, going to the actual boards themselves, they're huge, and I don't say anything, so I don't find them useful. So there is some engagement, but to them it's not an issue. You know, they're worrying about their elections and whether they'll be here in June for the constituent authorities.
Yes, understood. I guess if the West Midlands Combined Authority Mayor is saying that his area is at the maximum size that it could be, we could help him to reduce it by taking Coventry out and joining with them. You know, that might be something that we could productively talk to him about and have conversations about, because it is the thing that geography and economics say is the right thing to do.
They won't do that unless a lot of money follows it, because they're getting huge investment from the combined authority, and we have no promise of money on our side at the moment, sadly.
It all comes back down to our friend politics.
Thank you, Councillor Kohler. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. Could you elaborate a bit on the link between these SDSs and our local plan? Because it seems like there'll be quite a lot of potential implication, either in terms of the local plan needing to change post-adoption or even pre-adoption needing to take this SDS into account. And from reading the paper, it seems like the SDS defines the key infrastructure, which is critical to most parts of the plan. And so the whole thing seems to be very intertwined to me, but quite unclear as to what we'll actually need to do about that or can do about that. So I appreciate it might be early and it might be hard to actually say anything in detail, but any connection you're aware of already would be good to hear about.
Mr. Elliott?
Well, I mean, if I give you the theory first, so the theory is that the special development strategies will cover much larger areas than a single local authority. And yes, you're right, in that sense it is about being strategic about where development should or should not take place and what key infrastructure is needed to support that. And then individual local plans of individual local authorities should then fit within that framework. That's the theory. The problem is, of course, we're not starting off with a blank sheet of paper with everyone not having done a local plan. So in our case, we have a local plan. It's a long-term local plan, so we're looking at a period for 25 years, which in many cases is often about the same period as the special development strategy would look at. And in effect, what we are doing is in some respects doing what a special development strategy will do in the future. Because what we're doing is we're doing it now. And in theory, that is what other local authorities should be doing with their local plans as well. So the problem is the government is introducing this. There is no, across the whole of the country, there's no easy point in time where you can say that every single local authority has either got an old local plan or it hasn't started a new local plan. We're a bit like a convoy of ships going across the sea, and actually we're all kind of collectively, we're all over the place. So for some local authorities, eventually the special development strategy will fulfill the theory. It will fit in the timescale. It will set, this is going to be, broadly speaking, the kind of development volume you need to cater for. Broad areas, it should not be as specific as the local plan. So there would still be a job, so I'm afraid as councillors, you would still get the difficult job of deciding where development does or doesn't go. But of course, for other authorities who are closer either to completing their local plan work, probably it would be quite a few years before actually the special development strategy actually kicks in. Partly because if you do take a longer term view, well, actually the timeframes are probably going to be very similar, and in fact, probably what will happen is special development strategy will reflect what you've already got in your local plan. And this is the practicality of it, I think, is what would happen. Yeah, so it will in the future, going forward, it will in the future be much more important than it is now, because we just don't have that subnational kind of level of guidance about development volumes and development locations. There was a sort of similar structure, probably which stopped about 20 odd years ago, where the county councils actually had what they called structure plans, which did try to do a similar thing, but just for county areas. But all it did, in my view, having experienced it, it just created more conflict between levels of government. Because you can imagine it, if, let's say it was in Warwickshire and Warwickshire County Council had decided to put 10,000 houses in, well, I don't know, Burton Green, just choose anywhere. So, but then as a district council, we might say, hold on, we don't like that. And so often I saw you had that inter-authority conflict, let alone the community. And actually at that higher level, it's harder even still for members of the public to engage in that higher level. And yet, when they get to local plans and all the rest of it, they actually then find that part of the answer has already been predetermined. And actually that tended to make people feel even more angst-ridden and annoyed, because part of the argument had already been determined. So I think this is a kind of there's the danger in that kind of approach. I can see the benefits of it, but there are also some dangers in it as well.
Okay, Thank you. Right, I'm going to come to Councillor Payne, and then what I do want to do is try and get us to a point where actually we can focus in on what are some recommendations or comments we want to make back to Cabinet. So having a good discussion, it's very interesting, lots of really good information, but I think we need to try and formulate a view as members that we can feedback. There might be some more questions that we need to ask to get to there, but I've got a couple of thoughts. But Councillor Payne, I'll come to you.
Thank you, Chair. My question, please, was about the spatial development strategies. It's a bit of a devil's advocate question, really, and I've got a brief follow-up, please. Personally, I like the idea of these, and I think it's a very sound idea to have a regional strategy for things like skills, transport and infrastructure. But the paper mentions needing to get agreement from different local authorities via strategic planning boards. And of course, the different local authorities that need to be involved in getting that agreement are obviously going to have different political party control or different coalitions running them. So in practice, won't it be very hard to get agreement on what the spatial development strategy should look like in such a way that it can be easily delivered and established? Do officers see that process of getting agreement as being straightforward or very much a challenge going forward in practice?
Well, I don't believe anything in life is actually straightforward anymore, if indeed it ever was. So the straightforward answer to that is no, I don't think it will be straightforward. You could look at our own experience even now in doing a joint local plan. All right, it's not at the same spatial level as a spatial development strategy, but nevertheless it still has the same issues of just the practicalities of trying to keep two different authorities on the same track, following through the same process at the same time. There are some benefits to that in terms of economy of effort, but there are also some challenges in terms of, look, different organisations have different cultures, different approaches. There are geographical differences and maybe, you know, differences of priorities, and that is difficult. It will not be straightforward. I think, though, where the government might be heading to of linking the spatial development strategies and strategic authorities is that ultimately it sees the strategic authorities as having a mayor, and I think probably ultimately the mayor having the overall kind of deciding vote. I'm kind of surmising, but it seems to be very clear that that's one of the important issues for strategic authorities. The example of that to look at, I know it's kind of different, but is London. So London, there is a Greater London plan, and that is effectively signed off by the Mayor of London. And beneath that, each of the London boroughs has their own local plan. So, you know, it's a different scale, of course, but in theory, it's the same kind of model. And I just don't think I don't think it's easy, and it will take time and effort and patience.
Thank you. At 1.6.12 in the report, it talks about the powers available to the Secretary of State to intervene if the different local authorities don't reach agreement within a reasonable timescale. Presumably, you'd agree that it's not desirable for that to happen, and in terms of how the procedure works, it's going to be much better for the different local authorities to reach agreement organically and not have any kind of solution on an SDS imposed by the government. Would you agree with that?
I would in overall terms, not least because the Secretary of State won't want actually to take responsibility for the levels of growth he'll impose upon a particular area. I'm afraid he'd probably prefer you guys to take the blame or the glory, whichever way you want to term it. But I mean, again, you have got some comparable kind of provisions in relation to local plans. The Secretary of State could intervene with local authorities to actually force councils to actually get on with doing local plans. That has been threatened only a few times. It's never actually been exercised. It's usually been enough, if you like, with the threat The other thing is obviously in terms of more practical issues, like, for example, not having a 5-year land supply tends to kind of focus the mind, because often your choice is, it's not a question of development or no development, it's a question of planned development or unplanned development. And often that is, if you like, the practical incentive to try and get on and resolve something.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm going to try and help us, and I'll want members' input and officers and portfolio holders on this as well. So, listening to the discussion, it seems like there's a clear mix here, isn't there, between actually what we think would be right for our residents versus the politics that are likely to intervene. So I guess there's a question in my mind about actually if we're just going for actually what we think is the right thing, what are the implications if that isn't then open to us? So what would be, maybe it's a question for Mr. Elliott, that there is, I've heard reference and read reference to the prospect of not joining the West Midlands Combined Authority till 2032, which is when the next elections are, I understand. I think that was the way it was put out in the time cycle. I guess my question is, if we said actually we want to join the West Midlands Combined Authority, but we're prepared to wait till whenever that might be able to be facilitated, what happens in the meantime?
It's speculation, I suppose, but just to explain that timeline, if I may, the reason that it works that way is, certainly the mayor has said you can't really join before 2028, which is the next mayoral election. And effectively, you can only join at the time of a mayoral election. So the next one then is 2032. So if you don't get in this time, you have to wait another 4 years. That's why it seems so far away. The only, and it's speculative bit, the only thing I think you could try, but I do emphasise the word try because it doesn't kind of fit with the government's kind of requirements, is to try and advocate that for Warwickshire to become a foundation strategic authority, so no mayor, but then that implies you have to have 2 unitaries, because the government have also said you can't be a foundation strategic authority and a unitary council. That would be the only way, and then you could do what actually is possible now for councils and basically have a joint committee for something like a special development strategy and maybe for some transport things. But I emphasise that's speculative. It hasn't, the nearest that's been done is in Cumbria, where basically it's a bit difficult for Cumbria to join with anybody else. So there are 2 unitaries in Cumbria, and they have been made a strategic authority, basically because geography dictates they've nowhere else to go, basically. But that's been portrayed as an exception. So you would have to try and push that this is particularly unique set of circumstances. And I couldn't give you a rating of the success of that, but if you were going down, if we can't get to the ideal, what would be closest to that? That might be it. Then after that, then you're into, is it 1 unitary or 2 unitaries? Because the answer depends upon that. Sorry, I'm not sure that's as helpful as you'd like it to be, but I'm not sure there is that kind of helpful answer.
I guess I think what you're telling me is there isn't really an option. So well, actually, we'll wait until the Combined Authority sees the light and decides that it does want us to join them.
Well, I suppose that if you can put it the other side, the risk is the government has said it doesn't want any islands of devolution. So that I suppose the risk would be that actually the government doesn't let us wait till 2032. And as I go back to before, and that we get shoved in with another area simply because of administrative convenience, rather than because it actually is a kind of a useful geography.
Yeah,
that's the risk.
Yeah, and I think it might be a steer that again we want to give back to Cabinet. Might be that actually we're keen that we own our fate on this, if we call it that, rather than risking being shoved in with a government, something that's convenient to the government but not really to us. Did you want to come in quickly, Councillor Davison? And Councillor Campbell
Yes, I don't think we do own our fate. Government can decide what they want, but I think you're saying we should put in a positive message, and I would agree with that. I was just going to say, I think some of the council leaders don't want to do that. They want to say West Midlands or nothing, and won't consider a plan B. But I think you're suggesting, as I do, we should put a plan B in as well.
It's interesting. Councillor Kohler.
Thank you. It's all very interesting discussion. I mentioned kind of geography and economics versus politics. I kind of think we should repeat some of the politics back to the government, in that the government is saying its priorities are growth, growth, growth. And really, if you have geography and economics fighting against politics, that's going to be very bad for growth. Whereas something that, if you can align those things and have them pushing in the same direction, so if you can align geography, economics and politics, then that should empower growth. So if they really are serious about growth, then they need to be serious about enabling it and lining things up and not being in denial about them. And I guess the point about the West Midlands Combined Authority, that being a large area, it is a large area. It's a lot smaller than London, Greater London, but the mayor there seems to cope. So I guess if we have to have a holding pattern because West Midlands Combined Authority won't play ball now, then a Warwickshire Foundation Strategic Authority seems a sensible holding pattern. And as a time that there's a mayor who wants to make this region the equal of London, say, then maybe then it will go ahead.
Councillor White, then.
I mean, my one concern about trying to put a positive alternative, I mean, reading this paper, there's not a lot of plan Bs that come across very positive, are there? I mean, it strikes me that the idea of having a standalone Warwickshire FSA looks like possibly one of the better ones with a two, unitary reorganisation alongside it. That looks not ideal on a number of levels, but we'd then be advocating a standalone authority far short of the 1.5 million criteria. The other thing for two unitaries, I mean, if we're not going all out for the combined authority, would be pushing for separate authorities, it strikes me, because this paper is pretty clear that actually there isn't a single county-wide option on the table. But putting forward any sort of suggestion that we went for that option strikes me that we would be ripping apart our police, our fire. It doesn't strike me that there is a good option on the table unless we went for possibly the one, combined with, the two unitary solution, and the FSA seems about the only alternative to the combined authority to me.
Okay, Councillor Davison.
My personal view is, yeah, there are too many criteria, and you're right, the police may break up anyway, and whether the government's plan of aligning a local government, strategic authorities, health, police, fire all together will ever happen, or is it just too ambitious and that will fall on that? It's which criteria you think are important. Councillor Cole has mentioned growth, 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 which I think the government, you're right, may well want that. I would kind of think a strategic authority might be on similar places rather than travel to work. So in that sense, I think the Oxfordshire or Worcestershire one is better. So I'd just say a concern I have is if we are in the combined authority, particularly for the SDSs, that they'll see, oh, this is a good place to dump all our houses, They're struggling on that, lots of green fields, go for it, and they have the votes, so that's where it would go. So that to go for places that are economically similar, even though there aren't connections in terms of work and travel might be better than the alternatives.
So can I just ask then, sorry, Councillor Whiteman, I don't mind if I just jump in. We haven't necessarily talked about, the only two options we've really talked about are joining the West Midlands Combined Authority or being a standalone foundation strategic authority as Warwickshire. I guess I'm interested to get committee's views about the other two that have been discussed or mentioned. So one is the Worcestershire, Herefordshire, Gloucestershire, Cornwall, Isles of Scilly, wherever else we want to go. Sorry, I'm betraying my own views on that accidentally. Or the Oxfordshire, effectively M40 corridor, I think is the other one that we've talked about too. So first, can I ask, is there any appetite to join with Worcestershire, Herefordshire and Gloucestershire? Does anyone feel that's a sensible one? Councillor Gorman.
I think there's benefit, as I sort of said earlier, to sort of having that as a backup plan, because if the government, which it seems to be leaning that way, is saying that going with Coventry isn't really an option and we're probably not going to have a standalone authority, I think that's a better option than the alternatives that are being suggested.
Councillor Armstrong.
I'd also say that from the report, Oxfordshire's already in an SDS that seems quite large and settled, so it might not be an option here. And if you take that off, then, well, certainly for Warwick District, Worcestershire does seem like the best remaining option if you also take Coventry out.
Do we have any other intel, I guess, about the Oxfordshire option? Because it's mentioned.
Informally. So I did have a conversation last week with the Chief Executive of one of the local authorities in the Oxfordshire area. And they certainly got the economic geography connection. But I think what they also said was their kind of, for want of a better expression, their club was kind of pretty set, and their view was, well, if you came and asked us, you could probably get a very polite, but probably quite a firm rebuff. They would want to have a relationship, but I think the Thames Valley is kind of quite set, because you think about it, there's a Thames Valley Police Force and there's a Thames Valley ICB. It is actually quite large, so the whole of Oxfordshire, all of the Berkshire authorities, the potential SDS also might include Buckinghamshire. So it's although Buckinghamshire is a bit upset about that, apparently. So I think, to me, in terms of just following the data would suggest that Warwick District, if I just look at it in terms of Warwick District, has a stronger relationship with Oxfordshire than it does with Worcestershire. If you look at it from a South Warwickshire point of view, probably actually then Worcestershire has a greater influence over South Warwickshire than Oxfordshire, because in Stratford District, there is quite a lot of cross-border movements, particularly for work and for health-related purposes. So it depends at the geography level at which you kind of look at this. Gloucestershire's view, informally, the intelligence is they actually want to be as part of the West of England Combined Authority. And you can kind of see that, because at the southern end they're on the edge there. In some respects, the same kind of relationship with us and Coventry, but for them and Bristol. So I think that there's been no communication with Northamptonshire, but there have been reports of them doing a similar report to this about where do they look. They want to establish an FSA for Northamptonshire over across the two unitaries. But if that wasn't going to be worked out, they would seek to look for a kind of what they call a South Midlands. But I think that doesn't involve us in Warwickshire. It would be looking to Milton Keynes, Bedford Borough, probably Central Bedfordshire, Luton. But there again, those authorities have said previously they didn't want the Northamptonshire authorities. So it's a really difficult one.
Okay, but it's starting to feel actually, in terms of a plan B, that's not at Oxfordshire's not actually an option, really. It's
I can only relate it to you from an informal conversation, but I think there is some weight to be attached to that. But
okay, thank you. Right, members, any more views? How are we going to crack this one? So, right, let me start. I'll throw a few things out. So, spatial development strategy, I think from what I've heard, seen and read, it doesn't feel sensible, or it doesn't feel logical to have a spatial development strategy for this district that doesn't involve Coventry, because we are so inextricably linked with them. So on the eastern side, it has to involve Coventry. Where it involves on the west, how far it stretches west is like another discussion. But would that be advice that we would give to Cabinet to say? So I'm going to propose that. That's advice we give to Cabinet, that any spatial development strategy should include Coventry. So I'll propose that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kohler. All those in favour? I think that's actually everyone, I think. Right, okay. So we've got our first guidance to Cabinet. Our next guidance then is about the Foundation Strategic Authority and where we should look for that. And it feels like realistically, we've actually got two choices. One is a Warwickshire Foundation Strategic Authority. Actually, no, sorry, we've got three choices. We've got Warwickshire, we've got a Worcestershire, Herefordshire link, which has been put on the table, or we've got a dig our heels in and say we want to join the combined authority. So it's a third option. Do members have views on any of those that would help me get to a proposal that I could put to the vote? Councillor Kohler.
I guess my view would be that we should be working with Coventry, either it coming out of the combined authority or us going into it. And if that doesn't work, then a Warwickshire one. I think personally we should discount the Worcestershire one.
Councillor Phillips and Councillor Barton.
Well, I'm going to comment exactly the opposite way, I'm afraid. I think the risks of going into the combined authorities that we'll get lost. We've always had that concern in Warwick District since this started in 2015 or 2016, that we would get lost in the combined authority. And I'm talking about Warwick District, not just Warwick, but Warwickshire also would get lost. And although the Coventry link obviously is the most sense, but Warwickshire, Worcestershire, Herefordshire, I think we're talking about the least bad option here rather than the best option. And I'd have to go for the least bad option rather than going to the combined authority, where I don't think we'll have an influence or a voice.
Okay, Councillor Barton, did I see you as well? Sorry.
Like it's been said, it's difficult to work out if we don't know whether we're going north, south or the whole lot. It seems a bit pointless going to Hereford if it's one unitary, because one half's up in Derbyshire and the other half's in Wales. It's just difficult. So, yeah, stay as we are. Well, not LGR, but go as our own.
Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, seconding that, I think much has been said in all the other times we've discussed LGR. It's almost nonsensical to get anywhere until we know about the one unitary, two unitary thing. And so I just don't think we can make a recommendation that makes any sense without that.
But I think that we have been asked to give a view, whilst I appreciate it's difficult for us, it's also difficult for Cabinet. So, does somebody want to make a proposal from the committee? Councillor Barton.
I propose Warwickshire.
So you're suggesting a Warwickshire? Right. So there's a proposal. Councillor Knight is seconding it. So the proposal is the comments. Councillor Armstrong. Do you want
Just ask for clarity on exactly what we're proposing here. Because you know, and I mean that seriously. So obviously we can propose one of them as the top, but to me it makes far more sense to propose some kind of priority sequence rather than just one of them. And then we are proposing to exclude the other ones and only go for that. The whole idea doesn't really make a lot of sense to me unless we make this quite a lot more clear, and it's not necessarily that helpful for Cabinet if we just have one word. Well, that's my point. I don't think it's sensible at all without what we have at the moment. But if we have to do something, I mean, could our proposal just be that it is nonsensical?
Councillor Whiteman.
Sorry, it's just a question because I'm probably struggling to understand exactly what we would be proposing. If we were to propose Warwickshire, is that on the assumption that it would be a unitary? Because I see the paper says we couldn't do that unless it was two, sorry. If it was a unitary, that would be ruled out. So would we have to propose, you know, that as the option if there were two separate unitaries? But if we went for the one, we'd have to come up with an alternative. Or could we just go for the fact that we'd go for the Warwickshire on the basis that we would want the government to change its criteria and allow us to do a Cumbria solution, even though that was an exception?
Mr. Elliott.
I was just going to say, I mean, in effect, when you talked about Warwickshire, if you're kind of doing it as far as you can in compliance with the government's policy, then it is based upon the assumption that there will be two unitaries, not one. And you will be looking for a Warwickshire-wide foundation strategic authority covering both unitaries. So it would be similar in that sense to the Cumbria model. So I think that's what you're doing. I don't think you could get away with government policy to have a Warwickshire-wide foundation strategic authority and a single county-wide unitary council. That's the government has said. Technically it's possible, but it's not their policy. They have said that, and they haven't repeated that anywhere else. There's no example of that. So if you say in Warwickshire, you're talking about two unitary authorities, which is this council's position anyway, and that's what you'd be advocating in effect.
Okay, I'm going to let Councillor Whiteman come and then Councillor Kohler.
Sorry, yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, it's certainly my personal stance and the stance of this council on the whole. I know it wasn't unanimous, but I think it was fairly unanimous that we would go for two unitaries, and that's the option we're supporting. But I just wondered, in terms of the approach we're adopting as a committee, whether we're looking to cover all options, you know, because if it's out of our hands to some extent now, that's, you know, that may come back that it's a single unitary against all of our wishes. As an approach, are we making recommendations that go with our number one preference on the other thing, or are we trying to cover all bases and say, well, actually, if we don't get the result we want on that, then our favourite option is... That's kind of what I'm wondering, because the Warwickshire one doesn't work with it. We'd have to come up with an alternative recommendation if it's a single unitary.
No, I appreciate that, Councillor Whiteman. I think what we're trying to get to is what would our direction to the government be about what we would want. I think we've already decided as a council that we would want a two-unitary model in Warwickshire. So on the basis of us giving some direction to Cabinet, I think that almost has to be our assumption that that is what will happen, or that's the future reality that we're trying to push towards. Therefore, how would a future strategic authority look?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the only alternative would be, if it's a single unitary, the recommendation would be it has to be the combined authority. And I think on that we could sort of potentially stick, it has to be the combined authority if it's a unitary, because we don't have a single option and we couldn't go into a single, you know, one of our own. So basically, if it's two, we could have a Warwickshire I have concerns about going into the combined authority, to be honest. I do think we would be lost. I do sort of share those concerns, but it strikes me that actually joining the combined authority would be a better option than trying to shoehorn it into whichever part is convenient for us, because there are parts of the county in a single unitary it really would not work, you know, and there isn't an option there that works. I think that's what the paper's saying, and that kind of, I think that's quite a compelling argument, really.
Okay. Councillor Kohler, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. I guess trying to be as positive as I possibly can at 8:15, when I don't know how many more agenda items we've got. I would suggest that pitching it to the government that we're saying we can't possibly meet all of your guidance, therefore we are prioritising the guidance that best respects geography, economics, and lays the foundations for growth. Then a single Warwickshire unitary, single Warwickshire Foundation strategic authority would seem to be the best that we can do given the constraints that we find ourselves in. And anything else means, you know, you could make a case for South Warwickshire going with Worcestershire and North Warwickshire going with, I don't actually know where you'd send North Warwickshire, with Staffordshire or Leicestershire or Northamptonshire, I don't know. But yeah, maybe there's a case to explore there, but that seems less satisfactory than at least keeping a North and South Warwickshire in the same foundation strategic authority, and therefore a Warwickshire unitary, you know, respecting the views of the West Midlands Combined Authority Mayor. Then frankly a Warwickshire Foundation Strategic Authority seems to be, well, to quote, a least bad option, but the one that has the best prospect of enabling growth.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kohler. So I'm going to bring us back to actually where Councillor Barton started, which was that proposal with that, and I think Councillor Kohler's added some nice words to it, that actually within the constraints that the government are setting down, our view as members of the committee is that the least bad option for a foundation strategic authority would be a whole Warwickshire model with 2 unitaries within it. I think that is the proposal. Are you happy with that I've interpreted your proposal? So Councillor Barton's proposed that. Councillor Knight, are you still happy to propose, to second on that basis? Can I have a show of hands then from the committee, if that is what we are? 1, 2. Okay, so we've got, I'll vote with the committee as well on that. So we have everyone one ups. Are you? Okay, so, okay, thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Hopefully that's met the brief that we got in the paper. So that, I think I'm going to close the item there. Councillor Davison.
Sorry, can you just have a quick vote that if the combined authority is an option, would that be preferable?
What do you mean?
If there's an option to join the West Midlands Combined Authority, is that better than what you've just voted for?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davison. So yeah, so we voted on the basis we presumed combined authorities off the table. So I think what Councillor Davison is asking for a steer from us now as members is, if membership of the West Midlands Combined Authority were on the table, is that one that would be preferable for us? Councillor Kohler.
I would amend that suggestion and say, if we're breaking rules, can we instead of us joining West Midlands Combined Authority, can we break Coventry out and have a Coventry and Warwickshire and possibly a Solihull Combined Authority, Foundation Strategic Authority?
With respect, Councillor Kohler, I think that's taking us into a direction which is probably a little bit too too much for 8:20 on Tuesday evening with about 4 more items to go on the agenda. So can I just put the to the vote then? So this is effectively an indication that if membership of the West Midlands Combined Authority were on the table, would we, as a council, prefer that as our number one route? So that's the question. Can I see a show of hands to say in favour of the West Midlands Combined Authority being the preferred route? That's none, I think. Okay. Do I have anyone voting against? 1, 2, 3, 4. I think we have 1, 2, 3. Right, can you keep your hands up if you're voting against that? Right, so we have 7 against, and I'm presuming that's then 3, 4 abstentions. Okay, that was a steer from Scrutiny Committee. Okay, right, members, I'm conscious it's 9:20. I'm going to suggest we take a short comfort break now, and I mean short, because the longer we take, the longer we'll be here. So if we could just adjourn the meeting, and for anyone watching on YouTube, we will be back in about 5 minutes. Right, great. Okay, so thank you. Sorry for that short pause. Welcome back, everyone. So we've got two quick items. I'm going to do soft call-ins. First is item 10, which is the parking strategy. That was called in by the Lib Dem group. I'm going to come to Councillor Kohler on this one. Councillor Kohler, are there any comments that you would like committee to be making to Cabinet?
Yeah, I guess we didn't get any responses until after we'd kind of agreed that we were going to call it in. So part of it was to go through those. We did get a fair, I think by 10 o'clock last night, we'd got a good set of answers to questions. So that probably tied it up a lot. I guess 2 points. One is that Linen Street and Covent Garden are obviously not really covered in the parking strategy, and they're in separate projects. And so I guess it's just another nag that we don't seem to be making progress. Maybe there's progress going on behind the scenes, but we're not seeing it. I did look at the council's Ford plan. Covent Garden doesn't get a mention. Linen Street doesn't have a date. So that was going to be my nag. And then there was one specific point about card machine, how long they take, how slow they can take sometimes at car parks, because they're SIMs, so they're relying on the mobile network, and connectivity can be variable, should we say. I got very much the impression that when the report was done, some residents reported it and they kind of went, oh, maybe it's not that big a deal. But I think it is quite a big deal. And I don't think there's been any kind of testing of it. So I'd like to suggest that we would, on an annual basis, have somebody go around to all those terminals and test them and see how long it takes to actually get the transaction. And you can never be good because obviously the performance varies with mobile reception. It would at least be something that shows that we're listening and trying to address the problem.
Great, thank you, Councillor Kohler. So I think would members of the committee be comfortable if we just recorded some comments back to Cabinet that were actually concerns of the lack of clarity about the plan for Linden Street and Covent Garden in the parking strategy, and also a suggestion that we should be doing more to get to the bottom of residents' concerns about the speed of response of our parking machines. That would be what I propose. Councillor Kohler, would you second that?
Absolutely.
Would other members be comfortable that we just recorded those as comments back? So I think I'm getting enough hands up. Yeah, okay, cool. I know it's late. Keep going. Right, okay, so that was the parking strategy one, and then the other piece was item 16, which is play area improvement programme. Again, Councillor Kohler, I could come to you on that. Is item 16. So the reason for the call-in was to understand the criteria used to prioritising the programme and to explore whether additional resources would enable more play areas to be improved. And just to explain to members as well, particularly those who've not been on the committee for long, I get call-ins. I can effectively refuse call-ins, and what I was trying to do tonight was to keep an orderly and manageable agenda for this evening rather than have everything discussed in detail. So, Councillor Kohler, if you want to just give detail on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Though I thought going on till midnight was a perfectly good option. Yeah, so, by the way, on the previous one, we should also thank officers for working late last night to get the answers to the questions to us. Right, on play area improvements, really reading it, if you kind of cross-referenced appendices 1, 2, 3 and 4, it was basically saying we've got some parks that have got relatively old equipment that's already beyond its lifespan and we're not going to do anything about it for 10 years. So the basic thought was, so there's one in my ward, Roxburgh Croft. I've had residents ask us to do stuff about it because it was last done in 2017, and on the plan I think it says 2036/37. And yet, in one of the other appendices, it says all the play equipment has an expected life expectancy of 7.5 years. So it's already out of date, and yet we're not going to do anything about it for 10 years. So I was wondering, the purpose of calling it in was to explore whether if we were to provide more funds, could we do more of them more quickly?
Councillor Chilvers, do you want to make any comment on that? 'Cause, as we
I
have
can
you
make
here-
some comment. I'm slightly nervous about what I will say is, as I think the report says, there is a difference between the major refurbishments, which are actually the focus of this paper, and that is separate to routine playground repairs. And so this paper is specifically looking at those major refurbishments, of which there are only a small number slated each year and tend to have to find their own specific funding sources. The more routine playground equipment is the stuff that in the budget we put that extra 126,000, I think it was, to try to get round that repair stuff. So just because something's several years in the future in the big refurbishment one, it does not mean that nothing's going to happen in that playground, because there is that more routine repairs thing. So that's the bit I feel confident saying. I do think, you know, Councillor Roberts may be able to expand more, maybe at a question at full council or another alternative time.
Thank you for that. I guess the other thing that one of the other appendices said about this same play area was that it wasn't heavily used. And I guess the thing it didn't say was that it's not heavily used because, you know, it's just grass, so there's no kind of fencing off. So the play equipment around the area gets covered in dog mess regularly. So therefore, parents don't want their kids going and playing on it. So it's kind of, rather than a virtuous circle, it's created a vicious circle, and you know, it's a very pleasant little park, and really it's near a school. Really, it should be one that is very well used. People that do use it really like it, and they do go around clearing up the dog mess, which is above and beyond. And really, I'd like to be able to do better for them.
Thank you. And I think if Councillor Roberts was here, he would say that that is something that it's worth looking at, because I know that occurrence has happened with other playgrounds, and they have managed to find funds to do the little fencing off round it. So I think he would probably say, let's have a conversation about that.
I'll nobble him whenever I next see him. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Are you happy that's covered your points? Or do you want anything back to Cabinet? Oh, we've got Councillor Barton wants to come in as well. Councillor Barton. Is this about Whitnash?
And funnily enough, yes. Can I register my disappointment that Whitnash isn't mentioned once in this paper? And may I say that when towns and parishes take over all the play equipment in 18 months' time, no doubt Councillor Kohler will have full enjoyment in asking his residents to pay even more council tax to fund the fence around his play equipment. And he might even be able to... And another thing Whitnash has to pay for is dog waste bins. It costs us in the region of £1,300–1,400 a year. So no doubt that's something that town and parishes can take on as well.
Okay, thank you. Right, we've gone somewhere very strange. Councillor Kohler.
Are we coming back to local government reorganisation and making suggestions for what should be cascaded down to towns and parishes?
Right, okay, I'm going to move on, I think, and take us into confidential session. So the next item on the agenda is the item that was called in by the Conservative group, which was the Milverton Homes business plan. Because there is, I think the things that we need to focus on here are some questions that do relate to finances, and I think we need to just get straight in confidential session. So I'm going to propose that we consider resolving under Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 that the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items by reason of the likely disclosure of exempt information within paragraph 3 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, following the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006. I will propose that from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Armstrong. All those in favour? Right, that's carried. We will now go into confidential session.